When Hernan Cortes and his army marched into the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in 1519, they didn't just bring steel and gunpowder, they brought curiosity and greed. The Spanish conquistadors had heard tales of fabulous riches, of temples lined with gold, and of an emperor, Montezuma who ruled a civilization soaked in splendor. According to legend, the gold held by the Aztecs could amount to over $400 million in today's terms. But when the dust settled and the empire fell, that fortune seemed to vanish. For centuries, the question has remained: what really happened to Montezuma's gold? A treasure built over generations before unraveling the mystery. One must understand what the treasure represented. Montezuma's gold wasn't just bullion waiting to be looted. It was ceremonial, spiritual, and cultural. The Aztecs adorned their temples with gold, not for wealth, but for worship, offering the precious metal to the gods as a sacred medium. Golden masks, feathered headdresses with gold trims, intricate jewelry, idols, and ornate discs decorated with glyphs and precious stones were part of this divine repository. Unlike Europe, where gold translated directly to power, in Mesoamerica it symbolized the divine energy of the sun. Over generations, the Aztecs amassed a collection of gold, not hoarded in a single vault, but spread across temples, noble households, and sacred sites. Cortes' arrival and the first plunder. When Cortes first encountered Montezuma, the emperor welcomed the Spaniards with hospitality, possibly mistaking them for divine envoys. Gifts of gold and silver were offered, a mistake that only confirmed Cortes' suspicions that the Aztecs had enormous wealth. Within weeks, the conquistadors had seized the emperor, effectively taking the empire hostage. The Spanish began melting down golden artifacts into ingots for easier transport. Much of the artistry was destroyed in the name of convenience and greed. Montezuma's courtiers watched sacred heirlooms turned into bullion. Tensions soared. Eventually, the people rebelled. In 1520, during the event known as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows, the Aztecs struck back. The Spaniards, attempting to flee the city under the cover of darkness, were ambushed. Dozens of Spaniards drowned in the canals, weighed down by stolen gold. Some reports suggest that much of the plunder was lost that night, sunk into the waters of Lake Texcoco. The vanishing fortune. After regrouping, Cortes returned with a larger force. In 1521, Tenochtitlan fell. The Spanish expected to reclaim their lost gold and more. Yet when Hernan Cortes and his army marched into the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in 1519, they didn't just bring steel and gunpowder, they brought curiosity and greed. The Spanish conquistadors had heard tales of fabulous riches, of temples lined with gold, and of an emperor, Montezuma who ruled a civilization soaked in splendor. According to legend, the gold held by the Aztecs could amount to over $400 million in today's terms. But when the dust settled and the empire fell, that fortune seemed to vanish. For centuries, the question has remained: what really happened to Montezuma's gold? A treasure built over generations before unraveling the mystery. One must understand what the treasure represented. Montezuma's gold wasn't just bullion waiting to be looted. Eyed the city, the treasure had vanished. Temples were torn apart. Noble houses ransacked. Torture was used liberally in the search for answers, but no one would, or could, say where the gold had gone. It was as if the Aztecs had hidden it in the very soil of the city. For all their efforts, the conquistadors found only a fraction of what they expected. Theories began to emerge, some recorded in the annals of Spanish chroniclers, others whispered in indigenous oral traditions. Theory 1, hidden by the priest's own plausible theory, suggests that Aztec priests and nobles, seeing the writing on the wall, acted swiftly to hide the treasure before the final Spanish assault. As spiritual leaders, the priests would have understood the cultural and symbolic value of the golden artifacts and would have been entrusted with safeguarding them. Legends say that tunnels beneath the Templo Mayor and other sacred sites were used to conceal gold offerings. Some claim that the gold was scattered across lake islands, buried in nearby hills, or cast into sacred cenotes, sinkholes, to keep them away from foreign hands. To this day, excavations beneath Mexico City have yielded golden artifacts, but never in the volume described by early conquistadors. If the gold was hidden, it was hidden well. Theory 2. Lost in the Lake La Noche Trist's chaos supports another theory. Much of the gold was simply lost. In their attempt to flee, Spanish soldiers reportedly overloaded themselves with gold bars and ornaments. When ambushed, many fell into the lake and sank. Modern archaeological dives into Lake Texcoco have turned up weapons, armor, and remnants of the Spanish retreat. A few gold pieces have been recovered, but again, the bulk is missing. It's unlikely that hundreds of millions worth of treasure all went down in one night, but perhaps a large share was lost forever to the lakebed. Theory 3. The treasure caravan. In the aftermath of the conquest, rumors spread of a secret caravan that attempted to smuggle gold out of the capital. Some Spanish records refer to groups of indigenous porters, under Spanish orders or Aztec direction, carrying the treasure across the countryside toward Veracruz, where ships waited. One version of this tale ends in betrayal. A band of Spanish soldiers, acting independently, ambushed the caravan. After a violent skirmish, the treasure was said to be buried in the mountains, possibly in Puebla or Oaxaca, never reaching the coast. Others believe the porters were intercepted by indigenous resistance fighters who reburied the gold to keep it from falling into foreign hands. This theory fuels modern treasure hunts in central Mexico, but like many such legends, it relies heavily on hearsay. Theory 4. Taken to Spain. Not all of Montezuma's treasure was lost. Some portion did reach Spain, shipped aboard treasure fleets. Records in Seville document shipments of gold, silver, and precious stones from New Spain in the years following the conquest. However, the total recorded value falls far short of the sums rumored to have existed. Some historians argue that the value of the treasure was exaggerated by the Spanish to justify their conquest and by later romantics. But even allowing for hyperbole, there's still a considerable gap between what was expected and what was accounted for. Theory 5. A myth of the Min. The most cynical theory dismisses the $400 million figure entirely. According to this view, the lost treasure of Montezuma is more myth than fact, a romantic concoction inflated over centuries. The actual amount of gold held by the Aztecs, though impressive, may have been far less. In this view, Cortés and his men invented the idea of immense wealth to enhance their own glory. Reports of gold mountains and jeweled idols made for good storytelling, and for justifying their brutal conquest to the Spanish crown. But this perspective doesn't explain the cultural weight the treasure carried for the Aztecs themselves, or the extensive efforts taken to hide and preserve it. Oral traditions among Nahua descendants still speak of hidden caches and sacred gold meant never to be disturbed. Modern clues and discoveries archaeologists and treasure hunters alike continue the search. In recent decades, digs beneath the historic center of Mexico City have revealed altars, ceremonial objects, and buried offerings. In 1981, a monolithic golden disc was uncovered near the Templo Mayor. And in 2020, Mexican researchers discovered a gold bar that matched the chemical composition of items believed to be melted down during the Spanish retreat, potentially part of the loot lost on La Noche Triste. Each find adds a piece to the puzzle, but the full picture remains elusive. Technology offers new hope. Ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR mapping, and underwater archaeology may one day uncover lost chambers, sunken hoards, or mountain caches. Until then, the question remains tantalizingly open. A legacy of loss and power. Montezuma's gold, whether buried, melted, lost, or mythologized, continues to haunt history. It's more than just a financial loss. It symbolizes a civilization undone. For the Aztecs, it was the embodiment of the divine. For the Spanish, a prize of conquest. For modern Mexico, a cultural mystery that endures. In the end, perhaps the real treasure isn't the gold itself, but the stories it spawned, the whispers of resistance, sacrifice, and memory etched into the land and language of a people who once ruled an empire in the heart of the Americas. When the Spanish set foot on the shores of the Yucatan Peninsula in the early 16th century, they carried with them more than muskets and swords. Behind their steel and armor was an unshakable hunger for gold, glinting wealth rumored to flow like rivers in the heart of the Aztec Empire. The Spaniards, led by Hernan Cortes, heard tales of a city built on water and bursting with riches. Tenochtitlan, the jewel of the Valley of Mexico, was said to be home to gold beyond imagination. At the center of it all stood Montezuma I, the emperor whose treasure, valued in today's terms at over $400 million, would become legend. Yet when the empire collapsed and the capital lay in ruins, the treasure vanished. What happened to Montezuma's gold remains one of the great historical mysteries of the Americas, wrapped in a mixture of truth, myth, and shadowy fragments of history. Gold in the empire of the Sun Gold held sacred significance for the Aztecs. It was more than a precious metal, it was the sweat of the sun, a divine substance tied to gods and rituals.